You came back from the hard years deeper than ever, and certain you were broken. Carl Jung mapped what you are living. The hardest years did not break you. They forged a rare empath through what he called the night sea journey. But that gift casts a shadow. You look back at the collapse, the divorce, the isolation, certain those years buried who you used to be. Before this is over, you will know exactly what those years forged in you. You will learn the 8 marks the hard years left on your psyche, and why you have spent every moment since mistaking each one for damage. You will see the difference between the wounds you still carry and the instrument they became. Why you read people faster now, why hollow rooms exhaust you, why solitude stopped hurting. During the worst of it, you felt buried alive, certain the suffering was stealing time you would never get back. It was the forge. And the same depth that makes you rare is the reason you are still so alone. Nobody warned you the reward would arrive disguised as more loss. So you kept mistaking the forging for the breaking. You already know the feeling, even if no one ever handed you the name for it. It is the morning you sat in your car in the parking lot and could not make your hand open the door. Nothing dramatic. No scene. Just a body that had quietly refused to keep pretending for one more day. That small refusal is the night sea journey in miniature. It is the deep part of you pulling the plug on a life the surface had already outgrown. So here is where we are going. First, the marks you can almost see from the outside, the depth and the discernment that other people notice in you before you do. Then the quieter, more interior ones, the solitude that stopped hurting, and the wants that never came back. And finally, near the end, the one turn Jung warned about, the exact place where the gift becomes a trap, and the single thing he said you have to do to keep it from closing around you. You are not the only one who came out of the dark unrecognizable to yourself. You are simply one of the few willing to look directly at what the dark actually made. But the depth you carry now was only the first sign. And it was not the most dangerous. The first sign is the one other people notice before you do. Someone you love is bleeding. Grief, a diagnosis, a marriage coming apart in their hands. And you do something now that you did not used to be able to do. You sit down inside it with them. You do not flinch. You do not reach for the bright, useless phrases that people hand each other to make the discomfort stop. You no longer say it happens for a reason. You no longer say everything will be okay. You sit in the dark room of their pain, and you stay. You have probably mistaken this for a kind of weakness, a failure to keep your distance. But notice what you are not doing. You are not collapsing into their pain. You are not trying to fix it so that you can escape your own discomfort. You are holding it. There is a difference, and your body knows the difference even when your mind does not. Jung understood where this capacity is built. He returned again and again to the figure of the wounded healer, the idea that runs back through the old myths into the consulting room. Only the wounded physician heals. The power to hold another person's suffering is never issued at birth like a talent. A person builds it slowly and at terrible cost, out of having made their own descent to bedrock and clawed their way back up. And Jung knew the shape of that descent from the inside, because he made it himself. What happened then was a kind of burial in the earth, and many years were to pass before I came out again. It was an initiation into the realm of darkness, not a breakdown, an initiation. The hard years were your burial. This first sign, the depth that does not look away, is the proof that you came back up carrying something. This is the part the self-help world will never tell you, because it does not sell. Your capacity to understand pain was not a gift. It was charged to you. You paid for it in your own blood, in the exact years you now think of as wasted. The reason you can sit inside someone's worst night without looking away is that you have already been to a worse one of your own, and you know that a person can survive being seen there. This is not codependence. Codependence needs the other person's pain in order to feel necessary. What you have is different. It is an instrument and it is functioning correctly. The needle does not love the wound. It simply knows how deep the tissue goes. There is a woman I want you to keep in mind as we go. She has been through her own hard years. Tonight she is sitting with a friend who has just lost something irreplaceable, and she is doing the thing that took her a decade of suffering to learn. She is not cheering her friend up. She is not performing comfort. She is simply there, grounded, because she has stood in that exact darkness before, and she is not afraid of it anymore. She does not yet know what she has become. We will meet her twice more. To understand what this depth actually costs you, we have to look at what those years built in its place. You walk into a room, and within 90 seconds you know. You know who is performing and who is real. You feel the gap between what a person is saying and what is actually moving underneath them, and you feel it as a kind of physical pressure, a wrongness in the air that other people in the room do not seem to register at all. You cannot always explain it. There is rarely proof you could hand to anyone. And so for most of your life, you have been told some version of the same thing. You are too suspicious. You are reading into it. You are paranoid. But here's what changed in the hard years. Before the descent, you wanted to believe people. You needed to. Believing the surface was easier and safer, and it let you keep the relationships you were afraid to lose. The hard years burned that need out of you. When the floor dropped, you saw who was actually standing with you and who had only ever been standing near you. And once you have seen the difference under that kind of pressure, you cannot unsee it in daylight. Jung had a precise name for the organ you are using. He called it intuition, and he was emphatic that it is not mysticism and not a mood. He defined it as a kind of instinctive apprehension, perception via the unconscious. A rational, highly differentiated psychological function that takes in far more information than the conscious mind can name, and delivers its verdict as a certainty rather than an argument. Let me make this concrete. Think of someone you have actually sat across from. The host who runs every gathering, warm, generous, always refilling your glass, always asking the perfect question at the perfect moment. For years you could not say why you left his company feeling strangely hollow, almost lonelier than before you arrived. Now you can. Every gesture was aimed at a result. The warmth was a tool. Nothing was being given. Everything was being spent. You did not decide this about him in your head. You felt it in the room, the way you feel a draft from a door you cannot see. That is the experience exactly. You do not reason your way to the conclusion that someone is hollow. You arrive there fully before you have any sentence to justify it. What the hard years did was sharpen this function past the point where it can be ignored. The incongruence between a person's words and their being now registers in you the way a wrong note registers in a trained musician. It is not a suspicion, it is a perception. So let me say the thing you have been waiting to hear someone say. You are not paranoid. Paranoia invents a threat that is not there. You are detecting one that is, and that is the opposite skill. The tragedy is not that you read people this accurately. The tragedy is how long you let people who failed your read talk you out of trusting it. But this new clarity does not only turn outward onto other people, it turns its lens on your own environment, on the rooms you sit in, on the life you agreed to. The third sign feels like something has gone wrong with your body. You sit in the meeting and the words wash over you, and you feel a suffocation rising in your chest, a physical heaviness, as if the air in the room had been replaced with something that will not feed you. The small talk at the gathering exhausts you within minutes. The conversation that is all surface, the job that asks you to care about things you cannot make yourself care about, the social performance you used to be able to run on autopilot, all of it now drains you almost instantly. You leave these rooms and you are tired in a way that has nothing to do with how long you were in them. You may have started to wonder if you are becoming cold, antisocial, bitter, hard, and underneath the worry sits a belief you have been carrying so long you mistake it for a fact. You believe the exhaustion is a verdict on your character. You believe that if you were only stronger or warmer or less sensitive, you could sit in the airless room and feel fine. The the way everyone around you appears to. You have built years of quiet apologies on top of that belief. It is load-bearing, and it is wrong. What is actually happening is more interesting than that. Jung described how, as a person individuates, they begin to withdraw the projections they had cast onto the world. For most of your life, you projected meaning onto things that did not contain it. The title, the approval, the full calendar. You believed those things mattered because you needed them to matter, and the believing did real work for you. The hard years collapsed that machinery. And when the projections came back home, the objects they had been decorating were revealed as what they always were: ash on a beautiful plate. This is the feeling function delivering its verdict, and the feeling function does not negotiate. In Jung's map, feeling is not emotion. It is a rational function whose entire job is to evaluate worth, to rank what matters against what does not. When yours was crude, you could tolerate the inauthentic because you could not taste it clearly. The forging refined it. Now it tells you the worth of a thing whether you ask it to or not, and it will not let you pretend the ash is bread. So the exhaustion is not weakness, it is accuracy. When your system can no longer draw nourishment from an empty room, it has not failed you. It is telling you the truth, plainly, that there was never anything in the room to take. And this brings us to the reason the old life began to feel not just tiring, but physically impossible. Because when a false structure collapses, the energy it was devouring does not simply vanish. It has to go somewhere. And what it becomes next is the part almost nobody is warned about. At some point after the worst of it, something woke up in you that was not there before. Maybe it arrived as a need to make something. You started writing, or painting, or building, or planting, and the pull toward it was not a hobby and not a distraction. It had a strange gravity to it. Or maybe it arrived more quietly, as a clarity, a sudden, steady knowing about what you actually think, untangled at last from what you were supposed to think. Either way, you noticed a current of energy moving through you that your old, successful, functional self never had access to. This is the part of the story that sounds like a reward, and it is the part that frightens people the most, because it does not feel earned. It feels like it came out of the ruins. Jung gives us the mechanism, and it is not mystical at all. He wrote about the persona, the social mask, the face we construct to meet the expectations of the world. Through the persona, a man tries to appear as this or that. The danger, he warned, is that we become identical with the mask. We forget it is a mask. And here is the cost almost nobody calculates. Maintaining a persona you are fused with consumes an enormous amount of psychic energy. Every day, without knowing it, you were spending most of your available life force holding up a self that was not you. When the hard years shattered that mask, they did something violent and something liberating in the same stroke. They stopped the drain. All the energy that had gone into the performance, the appearing, the managing of how you were seen, was suddenly unspent. And that energy did not disappear. It became available to the personality underneath, the one that had been starved your whole life. That current you feel moving through you now, the thing that woke up, is your own life force, returned to you, no longer mortgaged to a mask. Our woman is on the other side of it now. She paints, or she writes, or she has simply made a quiet garden out of a patch of dirt that no one asked her to tend. And she is frightened, because the ambition that used to drive her, the corporate ladder, the markers of a winning life, has gone quiet, and this new thing has taken its place, and she does not yet trust that the trade was fair. She does not know that the energy was always hers. She only knows she cannot go back to spending it the old way. Yet there is a hidden requirement for this new energy to keep flowing, and it is the requirement that costs the forged empath the most. You turn down the invitation, you stay home. The phone goes quiet, and the night stretches out in front of you, silent and unstructured, and you wait for the old dread to arrive. It does not come. Instead, there is something you almost do not have a word for: relief. A deep, settling, nourishing relief at being alone with yourself in a quiet room. And almost immediately, riding right behind the relief, comes the worry. Because you remember a version of yourself who could not bear an empty evening, who filled every hour with people and noise to keep the silence away. And now that you do not need them, you wonder if you are isolating, withdrawing, becoming the kind of person something is wrong with. And here is the belief doing the quiet damage underneath. You believe your need for solitude is a symptom. You believe it is the thing about you that has to be fixed before you can be loved properly, before you can be normal again. You have lain awake bargaining with that belief on more nights than you would ever admit out loud. So let me take it apart. Here is what actually burned out in the fire. Not your capacity for connection, your dependence on validation, the desperate low-grade hunger for other people to confirm that you existed and mattered, the hunger that drove so much of your old social life. That is the thing that did not survive the descent. And its absence feels like loss because you have never lived without it before. Jung knew this stage intimately because he lived through it. Of his own descent, he wrote, "The consequence of my resolve was an extreme loneliness. I was going about laden with thoughts of which I could speak to no one." He did not describe this as a symptom to be cured. He described it as the necessary condition of the work. The confrontation with the deeper self happens in solitude, or it does not happen at all, because the noise of other people's expectations drowns out the one voice you finally need to hear. This is the turn toward the self, and it has a strange shape. The need for the crowd has to go quiet before the relationship with your own depths can begin. So the solitude that worries you is not the disease. It is the cost of admission. You are not retreating from the world. You are learning to inhabit the quiet room, because that quiet is the only place the conversation you most need can be held. If you have felt this, the night the dread did not come, and the quiet felt like relief instead, leave one word in the comments below. Home. I read what gets left under these videos, and the comment sections are full of people who were certain they were the only one who had gone quiet in this particular way. They are not. You are not. Leave the word and see how many people answer from inside the same silence. But the quiet of this new solitude hides a profound internal shift, one that runs deeper than your social life, because when the noise finally stops, you start to notice what you actually lost in the fire. And some of it is not coming back. There were things you used to want: the house, the promotion, the particular shape of success that you had been pointed at since you were young. During the worst of the hard years, those wants fell away. You assumed it was temporary, the way appetite leaves you when you are sick and returns when you heal. So you waited for them to come back. They did not come back. And this is one of the most disorienting discoveries on the whole journey, because you cannot tell anyone about it without sounding either enlightened or broken, and you do not feel like either. You feel like someone who has lost the life they were supposed to want and has not been issued a replacement. Jung's word for what happened here is individuation, and it is more radical than people realize. Individuation is not self-improvement. It is the reorganization of the psyche around its true center, the formation and particularization of the individual as distinct from collective psychology. In plain terms, it is the slow process of separating what is actually yours from what you absorbed by living among other people. And here's the part that stings. Most of what you wanted was never yours. It was collective. It was the set of desires the culture installs in everyone, and you carried them faithfully because you had never been forced to check whether they were real. I think of a man who spent 20 years wanting his father's approval. He shaped a whole career around it, a whole way of speaking, a whole posture. His father died in the second year of his own collapse, and somewhere down in the grief, he noticed the strangest thing. The wanting died too. Not healed, not resolved, just gone, the way a radio station goes silent between cities. And in the silence, he understood something that frightened him. He had never actually wanted the approval. He had only wanted to stop needing it. The need had been the whole engine, and the fire had finally burned through the fuel line. The hard years forced the check. Under that kind of pressure, the borrowed values could not hold, and they fell off you like the costume jewelry they were. What you are left with is smaller and quieter and unmistakably yours. The center of gravity has moved. It used to sit outside you in the world's scoreboard. Now it sits underground in something closer to the core. So you have not lost your ambition. You have lost ambitions that were never yours to begin with. And the silence where they used to be is not emptiness. It is the absence of a noise you mistook for your own voice. This reorganization of your values leads directly to the most painful realization of the whole journey. Because if the wants were never yours, then neither was the self that wanted them. You tried to go back. You did everything right. You returned to the old job, the old group of friends, the old version of yourself that everyone recognized, and you tried to wear it again, and it would not go on. You stood in rooms where you used to feel at home and felt like an actor who had forgotten he was in a play. You opened your mouth to make the old conversation, and the words came out hollow, because you could no longer pretend to be moved by things that no longer moved you. You have almost certainly read this as your own failure, as proof that you are broken, antisocial, that you have lost some basic human ability to belong. You watch other people slip easily back into their lives, and you wonder what is wrong with you that you cannot. Nothing is wrong with you. The persona will not reform, and that is not damage. That is the diagnosis confirming itself. Remember Jung's warning. Through the persona, a man tries to appear as this or that, and the danger is that he becomes identical with it. For most of your life, you were identical with yours. You did not have a mask. You thought the mask was your face. The hard years tore it off, and once a mask has been torn off and you have seen what was underneath, you cannot press it back on and believe in it again. The performance requires a sincerity you no longer possess. So the incompatibility you feel with your old life is not evidence that you broke. It is evidence that the transformation took. A self that could comfortably slide back into the old costume would be a self that had not actually changed. The fact that you cannot is the proof. The discomfort is the receipt, which brings us to the final quietest shift in the way you see the world, and it is the one that, once it happens, can never be reversed. There was a time you envied them, the people who never had the floor drop out from under them, the ones with the intact marriages and the uncomplicated weekends and the easy, untroubled happiness that seemed to require nothing of them. You looked at those lives and felt cheated, because yours had cost so much and theirs seemed free. You do not envy them anymore, and this is the 8th sign, the most interior of all, because it happens almost without your noticing. Somewhere along the way, you stopped measuring your insides against other people's outsides. You looked again at the comfortable and you saw, underneath the ease, the enormous and fragile effort it takes to maintain it. You saw the armor. You saw how much has to be kept out, how much cannot be looked at, how carefully the surface has to be defended. And you understood that their peace is not a wider life than yours, only a more heavily guarded one. Jung helps us name what you are seeing. The persona, he taught, is not only a personal mask, it is collective armor, the shared set of conventions a person wears to remain safely inside the group. The comfortable are not lying, they are protected. They have not made the night sea journey, and so they have kept the plating intact, and it holds right up until the day it cannot. Once you have seen the armor for what it is, you can never unsee it. And that is why the envy dissolved. You cannot envy a sleep you have already woken from. You would not trade your hard-won sight for their comfortable blindness. Even on the nights the sight costs you everything. You stopped wishing you had been spared the journey because you finally understood what the journey gave you and what it cost the others to avoid it. But recognizing their defenses forces a terrifying question back onto you. Because if you can see their guard that clearly, the obvious next question is what you cannot yet see about your own. And this is where the gift turns its face. Here is the part the survivors do not want to hear, and it is the most important part of the entire video. The same depth that makes you rare is the thing that isolates you. Every one of the 8 signs has a dark twin, and the longer you go without naming it, the more power it has over you. Jung was unsparing about this. In Ion, he wrote that anyone who insists on denying the shadow becomes identical with it. The trait you refuse to see does not go away. It runs you from behind. And the forged empath carries a very specific shadow, one that is almost invisible because it wears the mask of healing. It looks like this. The depth that lets you sit with anyone's pain begins, quietly, to pull you toward the broken. You find yourself drawn again and again to the wounded, the unavailable, the ones who need rescuing, and you tell yourself it is compassion. Sometimes it is, but sometimes it is the old wound, using your gift as a doorway, walking you straight back into the exact dynamic that crushed you the first time. The instrument that was forged to hold pain can become a magnet that seeks it out. If you do not recognize this mechanism, your forged sensitivity will slowly calcify into a permanent trap. You will spend the rest of your life re-entering the fire and calling it empathy. And there is a second shadow, subtler than the first, the identity of the survivor. The wound can become a new persona, just as rigid as the old one. You traded the mask of the successful, untroubled self for the mask of the one who has been through the dark and come back deep. And if you are not careful, you will become identical with that one too. Because substituting the mask of the victim, or the mask of the survivor, for the mask you lost is not healing. It is inflation. It is the ego claiming the wound as a trophy. Jung knew that escaping this loop requires an entirely different relationship to your own scars. Not pride, not shame. He held that the acceptance of oneself is the essence of the moral problem and the epitome of a whole outlook on life. Acceptance, not worship. You hold the depth without making it your crown. So here is the work, and it does not end. Individuation is not a destination you arrive at. It is a discipline you practice, and the discipline is this. You learn to tell the difference between a true reading from the feeling function and a projection from your own unhealed wound, between the room that is genuinely hollow and the room that only reminds you of an old one, between the person who actually needs your depth and the person your shadow is using to walk you back into the flames. True integration does not mean you stop feeling. It means you stop being run by feeling you have not yet examined. Our woman, one last time. She is standing in an ordinary moment, the same kind of gray, unremarkable moment that opened this video. A quiet kitchen, an early hour, and she recognizes, fully and without panic, exactly what she now is. She does not grieve the woman she used to be. She does not worship the depth that the hard years gave her. She does not perform the survivor, and she does not nurse the victim. She simply lives in the instrument she became, and she uses it, and she sets it down when the work is done. This is the moment the empathy stops being a liability and becomes an instrument of truth. So look back one more time at the stretch of years you have spent calling waste. The divorce, the collapse, the long isolation, the season you were certain was stealing something from you that you would never get back. You were not wrong that something was being taken. You were wrong about what? It was not your life being stolen. It was the mask being burned off it. The gray was not waste. It was the forge. Before you go, tell me one thing. Of the 8 signs, which one did you recognize first? Which one was the mirror you did not expect to be holding? Leave it in the comments, and whatever words you have, even if the only honest words are "I thought it was just me." Because someone is going to scroll down after watching this, carrying the exact estrangement you came in with, and your sentence is going to be the thing that tells them they are not alone in the dark. They are just early in the same crossing. Say it and stay. There is more of this work ahead, and I would rather make the rest of the journey with people who already know what the gray was for.
Empaths aren't broken. They're alchemists in progress. The Alchemist's Path gives you drills, Jung-based boundaries, and 3 exclusive chapter videos to turn overwhelm into clarity. By Surreal Mind, 236-page downloadable ebook in stock. Begin now at thesurrealmind.com.